Hello, everyone. Have you had a good week?
Yep.
Hey, Sheila.
No.
Hi. Do you mind if I just check sharing my screen real quick?
Sure. Let me make you, this is good because I need to. All right. You are now co-host.
Okay, I feel important. Can you see it?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Faculty Leadership Academy, albeit virtually. We've got one more person that needs to join us, but I think we can go ahead and get started. Here's an agenda for today. Can you all see my screen, the PowerPoint? Okay. Here's an agenda for today. We'll be hearing from Kim Welch with more about Clifton Strengths. We'll have an HR 101 session, a session on building and maintaining teams, and then on managing conflict in the workplace. I've set out breakout rooms. There'll be points at which your presenter wants you to go into a breakout room and chat. Fingers crossed I set them up properly and I can just zip you all into your breakout rooms. If zippy isn't the way it's going to go, then we'll wade through it together. But when you're in your breakout rooms, you should have a 1 minute. When I am about to close them, you should have a 1 minute timer that will let you know that that we'll be moving on. So we're going to assume that that's going to work well until we learn otherwise. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Kim is happy to answer questions throughout the presentation, throughout her presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Kim, I assume you're still co-host, so you can go ahead and start. But you're muted.
Thank you. All right, 1 second. All right, can everybody see? Yes, okay, great. Well, good afternoon and happy Friday. It is a pleasure to be back with you. I have 15 minutes with you today. So we are going to call this an introduction. This is by all means not a full toolkit on how to approach managing teams from a strengths-based perspective, but I want to give you some things to think about, and I look forward to going deeper with you when we get together in person next time in February at the Student Success Summit. So give me just a second and let me rearrange something. Okay. So why do we take a strengths-based approach to, sorry, give me this. I've got to get my screen arranged here. Thank you for your patience. So why take a strengths-based approach to managing teams? I think, and I hope that from our first time together that you can agree that there is a strong connection between who people are and what they do best. And then there is also a strong connection between what people do best and how they feel about their work. And then finally, a strong connection between how people feel and how they perform. So Gallup's ongoing research, they've been at this for a really long time. And so that body of research now includes tens of millions of in-depth interviews that they have conducted with employees and managers spanning 160 countries. They've interviewed all kinds of different managers, from sales managers to senior account executives, team leaders, professional sports coaches, military leaders, and public school superintendents. And they've conducted roundtable interviews with chief human resource officers of 300 of the world's largest organizations. So that's a pretty significant data set. So from this extensive research, Gallup found that great managers have less in common than people might think. They have all different styles of motivating and directing employees and building relationships with their employees. But within all of these variations of leadership style, they discovered a common approach to management that supports all managers in building and leading high performance teams. That they are three things: strength-based, engagement-focused, and performance-oriented. So let's talk a little bit about each of those. So a strength-based approach is really applicable regardless of your leadership style. And as I've given Sheila a resource for you to have as a follow-up reading, and it is talking about leadership styles and how Gallup's strengths Clifton Strengths fits into different leadership styles. So I think we've already laid the groundwork for you to understand why a strengths-based approach is effective, and that you have become, at least at a basic level, aware of your own talents. So a strengths-based manager believes that a person's talents are their best opportunity for success. They're aware of their own talents and they assume responsibility for developing those into strengths, as well as managing those blind spots that we talked about. And they understand and appreciate that their employees, what their employees' talents and strengths are, and they use that information to individualize their management approach for each team member, which sets them up for success. So when it comes to individualizing your approach, strengths-based development is more than just identifying strengths of your team members. It's about helping people recognize and develop those talents and strengths as well as appreciate those of their colleagues. And the good news is that employees want to learn and grow. They want to work for managers and organizations that offer new challenges to help them become better. Because honestly, the number one reason that people change jobs today is for career growth opportunities. So if they don't get it in our organizations and in our workplaces, they will look for another place where they can grow. So a culture of high employee development is the most productive environment for employees. They need, and we need, I know I need, continual learning and growth opportunities to stay up to date. So performance oriented. So performance
Give me just a
oriented.
second. Sorry,
Yes.
Kim, are are you advancing your slides? Because we still see the first
Yes.
slide.
Oh dear. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. Okay, let me figure that out. So what are you seeing right now?
The welcome slide.
Oh dear. Okay.
That's why take a strength-based, believe a person's talents,
Okay. So
performance oriented.
I'm just gonna keep it right here in this sort of notes mode. You guys kind of see this little outline over here on the left?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we're good. We can advance back and forth now, I think. Let's see. I'll just hand click it. Okay, thank you for letting me know that. Um, okay, let me work this out just a second. Okay, everybody's on performance oriented? Okay, great. All right. So performance oriented. Performance oriented managers, they set clear performance goals and expectations. They measure the right outcomes and then they provide feedback and direction to help their employees and teams make the right decisions and then take action. In Garip, Kentucky, we use the phrase clear is kind. And people want to be successful in their role. So being clear about what their role is and defining for them what success looks like is vitally important. And then regularly communicating their progress, including their wins and their opportunities for growth, sets them up for success in the long term and sets you up for success as a team leader in achieving your overall goals. Um, Gallup found that while clarity and of goals and expectations is perhaps the most basic of team needs, about half of employees reported that they lack direction and aren't really sure what they are supposed to do at work. Okay, engagement focused. So, engagement focused managers authentically care about each person on their team and help each employee grow within their role. They intentionally build a team culture of collaboration and partnership, and they focus on the engagement of their employees, which means putting systems in place to ensure that they are meeting those workplace needs. So, as leaders, we have perhaps the single most important role in our organization, department, or college. You set the tone for the work environment. So you can look at putting systems in place, such as being intentional and consistent about taking time to celebrate wins. We all work very, very hard, and sometimes it's easy to skip over the good things that are going on, small and big. And so you have to be intentional about setting aside that time to celebrate wins as a team. I think it's also important to define roles for collaboration, right? When we can say, okay, go work together. You as a manager have the opportunity and the responsibility to define those roles for collaboration and what you expect for each team member to bring to the task or the project at hand. Another thing that we say in Europe, Kentucky is team building is a meeting outcome. So a lot of times we don't want to take time to do team building exercises and activities or spend time together just not working. But that type of engagement is important and really leads to an increase in overall productivity because folks can work together much easily when they have time to create those bonds and relationships. So I'll give you 5 C's. I love a good alliteration. I'm going to give you 5 C's to team success. So to maximize team performance, every team member must be connected to a common purpose. So the common purpose is in the middle for a reason because that's all shared common purpose and that is shared by everyone and clear and at the center of what you do as a team. So everyone is connected to that. That they communicate with everyone effectively, that they collaborate to find the best, most effective methods to work together and to use the team's resources. And then again, that celebration, right? That we celebrate not only our successes and what we produce and accomplish as a team, but celebrate those individual strengths. So, what does it mean to get individualize your approach? Sorry, I'm kind of working on two screens, so just bear with me. So, you may not have the opportunity to implement Clifton strengths across your team, and you may have, 150 employees or not the budget to be able to purchase that assessment and kind of do the process that we have done together. So I'm trying to keep that in mind as I talk to you through this. But you can use your own tools, excuse me, to develop and identify the strengths of individual employees. We're going to talk about this on an individual level and then talk about it on a team level. So, obviously, you can use a top 5 report to do that or another Clifton Strengths assessment to do that. If you don't have access to this, I encourage you to use these core questions and that you have your employees answer these on their own, and then you answer them from your perspective, and then that you share and you have this conversation together. So, what are the most important tasks, responsibilities, and expectations of this team member? What do I see as their strengths? What do they see as their strengths? What is the unique value that this person brings to our team as we pursue our mission together? And then what are the things that motivate and inspire this individual? What are their goals and their aspirations? And what are their challenges? And then so when you have an opportunity to kind of have that conversation on an individual level so that you understand them better, then you can also then begin to identify opportunities for you and your employees to work better together. So, how are we similar? What are some strengths and talents that we share? And what are some talents and strengths that we have that are different? And ask yourself as a manager, does this team member have an opportunity to do what they do best every day as their strengths, right? We talked about those talents and that flow and those glimpses of excellence. Does this team member have an opportunity to experience that every day in the role that they're currently in? And if not, then what adjustments, if you have the opportunity to make adjustments, what adjustments can you make to use their strengths to their full extent to help you reach your mission and goals as a team unit or organization? And then if there's opportunities, right? We want to continue to develop the individuals that we are responsible for. And so what are the development opportunities that you as a manager can provide this team member to help develop those talents into strengths? So then if we look at a team, so that's kind of that individual level. But if we're talking about what a strengths-based team is, it's a group of imperfect but talented contributors who are valued for their strengths and who rely on one another to realize individual and team excellence. So, developing a strengths based team is about learning the talents and strengths of each team member and finding ways to combine those talents and strengths and align them to accomplish goals together. Like we talked about last time, we all can't be good at everything, right? And so that's why we work together as a team. So it's also important for you to not only know your strengths and for each team member to know their strengths and their natural talents, but for them to know that of each other and to share that information across the team because that gives them opportunity to rely on one another in areas where they are weaker and other people are strong. So let's and so you as a manager have an opportunity to look across your team at those various talents and strengths and identify opportunities to connect people for collaboration. So for example, if you have your team has an unexpected challenge, so, how might you use each team member's natural talents to help you complete the needed tasks? And then, how can you pair up members on specific tasks to best utilize their strengths? So, say for example, you need a problem solved. Now, here's where I'm going to use some Clifton Strengths language. So, you need a problem solved. Then you want to look across your team to folks like those that have strong analytical themes because they get to root causes easily, restorative folks who are adept at problem solving and naturally talented, and then those strategic who are strong in strategic talents, and so that they easily can look at the problem at hand and create alternatives for the team to consider about ways to proceed. So, what if you need new ideas? Well, you could look towards folks that have strong ideation because they're like popcorn poppers and just produce ideas very easily and can easily see the connections between things. You can tap into someone that has strong futuristic theme, and because they have a way of easily exploring what could be. Right? And then in the area of new ideas, someone you could tap into is someone that's strong in communication themes because they easily can put thoughts into words and begin to construct a story and take those new ideas and put language around them for the rest of the team. So what if you need like a detailed process developed? Then you want to look towards folks that are strong in consistency because they crave those clear rules and procedures that everyone can follow. Or perhaps tap into an arranger because they can easily determine the arrangement of resources and how to arrange those in a way that um, brings maximum productivity. Or you could tap into or you could tap into someone that's strong and deliberative because they will look at those processes and they will anticipate obstacles so you can do that in a proactive way. So if you have a new process now and you need those implemented, then you want to look to those executing strengths, right? Like activator, because they are biased towards action. So they're easily going to turn that process that's been developed and they're going to turn that into action to be able to carry that out. Or lean on someone who's strong in focus, right? So because they can take a direction or a new process and keep others focused on the goal at hand. Or you could tap into someone that's strong in adaptability because they are able to adapt to change very, very easily. And they can also bring other folks along to adapt to that change as well. I'm going to share with you. This is an example. So this is one of the tools that Gallup gives us is a team-based grid. So you can take each of your team members' top 5 strengths and look at them across the spectrum. I know this is really small. It's just a snippet. So you're looking at me and my leadership team here, and you can kind of see the spread, right, of different strengths that we have here. So, for example, Missy on my team, who's my communications and outreach associate director, we lean on her and the team goes to her for creative ideas. If we need a catchy title for something or a creative spin on something, we look to Missy and we rely on her. She's also very strong in positivity and she is the silver lining in my team. She is very good at helping us see the positive in situations that where we where we might be struggling to see the positive. Then we have a Bruce that's really strong on woo and communication. And so when we have a new idea that we want to pitch to our partners, or we want to develop a new partnership, we're going to send Bruce in because he's very good at winning other people over and really good at telling a story and bringing people, getting people excited about that idea. And then finally, like a Laura. So she's my director of operations and very strong in consistency. So we lean on her for that consistency, not only in policy and process development, but for carrying that out and helping create new ones when needed. So that's just an example of how you can kind of look across your team and share with your team each other's strengths and be able to identify and lean on those. So I think I'm at my time. So I have just some final next steps for you in terms of the area of strengths-based approach. So like I said, I've given Sheila a "What's Your Leadership Style" article that helps you think about your leadership style within the context of Clifton Strengths. In your November faculty circle, we're going to follow up on that talent map homework that I gave you. And that was the 7 expectations of success in any leadership role, and challenging you to look across your 5 themes and how you can leverage each one of those to help you do things like communicate more effectively and inspire others and lead change. So we've got that. That's on the agenda for your November faculty circle. So if you haven't got to um, complete that yet, you might find that and be prepared to have that discussion in November. Um, it's only been 2 weeks since I've seen you, so we're gonna keep, um mine and Sheila's goal is that you get to set a goal for each of your top 5 themes as we go through the months together. We've only been 2 weeks on that first goal that you wrote on your note card, so we're gonna stick with that goal, for now, and then we will set, another goal attached to another theme the next time that we get together. Now, one final thing is I would really love your feedback. So I would like to know from you what more you would like to learn regarding Clifton Strengths. What questions do you have at this point that I can help address in our additional time together? Hopefully, let me see here. Hold on. Let me just give you this Menti screen. Are you seeing a Mentimeter screen that has a wave like this on it? Okay. So you can take your phone and you can go to menti.com and type in that code, which is 629-12758. And just give me a little feedback. What more would you like to know? What questions do you have that will help you think more deeply and activate a strengths-based approach in your leadership? Okay, good. It's working. I got a response. Great. Okay. You can continue to give me those questions, but my time is up. So I am going to give the floor back to you. Thank you guys for your time. It's great to see you this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Kim. We really appreciate it. We're going to move on next to our HR 101 session. I am, let's see, I'm trying to find you on the screen. Ray, I'm going to make you co-host. I don't know why it's so hard to find people.
Yeah, make Candy co-host.
Oh, make Candy the co-host? Okay, I see. All right, Candy, you are co-host and you can go ahead and share your screen and start, but you're muted.
Okay, while Candy gets ready to share her screen, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Ray Smith and I'm the HR director at CPE. And we want to thank you for letting us lead you on a dash through HR this afternoon. I've been at CPE for 21 years. I have 12 years of state government HR experience in 2 separate stints separated by 20 years in testing and assessment, which included assessment work at with Kentucky universities and with KCTCS campuses. I'm a product of undergraduate and graduate work from UK from the very long time ago times. I retook the Clifton Strengths Finders today, and my top 5 are learner, belief, which replaced my earlier futuristic thinking, achiever, responsibility, and developer, which replaced my younger assessment center-oriented analytical self. And I'm pleased to be joined today by my colleague, Candy Neal, who brings years of post-secondary HR experience to our discussion today. Candy, please introduce yourself. Okay, you're muted, Candy.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Candy Neal, and I've been with CPE for about 7-8 months now, and I look forward to talking with you all today.
Okay, Candy. Okay, today we're going to do a quick overview of HR, and we're going to talk about hiring, a few HR legal requirements, which faculty leads play a role in, and performance issues. We're going to talk about the faculty lead's role in each of these and when to work with HR and your legal staff for support and guidance. And we do have some red flag issues for you to take a closer look at. In the academic setting, HR plays a crucial role in recruiting, retaining, and developing faculty by managing the hiring process, providing professional development opportunities, ensuring compliance with employment regulations, handling employee relations, and fostering a positive work environment. And the reason for that work is to support faculty research and teaching effectiveness, and ultimately to contribute to the overall student success at the institution. In most HR issues, the faculty lead is the employee's first point of contact. I want you to find out where the support offices and personnel are located on your campus and keep that contact information available. There you are as the faculty lead. You need to know your HR office and who those people are in advance, and they are your supports in your work with people. Find your legal office. At CPE, HR is located under legal because we're the people who need legal advice on a regular basis. So you also will need legal advice when you're navigating your work with employees. Find the disability office. Find your safety office. And if you have a separate office that deals with workers' compensation, that's also one that you need to know in advance. You don't need to be searching for that when there's an injury or accident. And again, do not be afraid to contact these offices. These offices exist to support you and your staff. That's a whole part of the systemness of post-secondary education. So these are your partners in your work.
Okay, so one of the processes we're going to discuss today is hiring. Most, if not all of your institutions have detailed procedures for hiring, and they will be different processes from faculty and staff. So please obtain those guidelines from HR before you start the process and follow that process that's set out by your institution. And we're going to give you a few things to consider. And one of them is with recruitment. So to find that best applicant, please recruit a diverse applicant pool.
When you get ready for the interview portion, follow your institution's guidelines, but please make sure the questions you ask an applicant are job related and do not move into the off-limit areas. People can't be denied employment because of race, color, national origin, religion, gender, sexual orientation, marital or family status, pregnancy, disability, genetic information, or age if you're over 40. So stay away from questions that move into any of those areas. You're looking for someone who can do the job, and none of those protected areas are relevant to most jobs. You know, if you have to lift a certain weight for a job, you can certainly ask, are you able to lift this weight? Or if they're available on, or you can ask if they're available on weekends and holidays, if that's relevant to the job. But you cannot inquire about those things based on assumptions you're making about an individual candidate. And all candidates for the same position should be asked the same questions and have an equal amount of time to provide responses. Your HR office probably has a database of acceptable questions. We do here in state government, and many institutions have those. Please tap into those. But you may find that you have to craft some questions of your own to find out about specific knowledge, skills, or abilities that are required for your particular job. In those cases, please ask open-ended behavioral style questions. Research tells us that that's the best way to get insight into a candidate. And those types of questions usually begin with, tell us about a time when you did something that was related to that job, or describe a situation when you did something that would be a scenario that you would run into in that kind of position. What you're looking for is a response that allows the applicant to provide you with the situation, the action that they took, and the result. And then you simply select candidates for their ability to do the job and whether they can do that job, the job required with reasonable accommodation.
Okay, so after the hire, the next step we're going to look at is onboarding. And you've invested in selecting the best candidate, and you want that candidate to be successful. Think of onboarding as a year-long process with purposeful check-ins weekly and at the 30, 90, 6-month, and year-end milestones. These are going to provide your employee the information support needed to be successful in their role. As a new supervisor, when I was at the University of Kentucky, it was very helpful that they provided us with onboarding checklists to use as a guide to ensure we gave our new employees every opportunity to excel at their jobs. The first week milestone could be simple instructions as, where are you going to park? You know, where are the bathrooms? Those kind of things. Just something to get them, you know, meet staff. And then as you proceed, that 6-month interval, you are asking for feedback, making sure that the employee is meeting their work expectations. And then for my weekly meetings, I would have what I called a let's catch up. And I've always called them, and I usually kept them informal, but I did try to supply a brief outline in advance of what we might be discussing. I know you guys are faculty folks, so it is a brief outline for what you might discuss that day. So okay. So then let's switch gears a little bit and talk about HR topics that are within the working life of the employee. One thing is probably going to be the family medical leave. So when you are aware that you have an employee that is experiencing an issue, either from their own health condition or the health condition of a family member, the faculty lead, or you, must make sure that the employee is aware of their rights under the FMLA. One of the first signs an FML issue might be happening is a repeated sick leave absences. So as supervisors, you can alert HR and they will advise you and the employee of their rights and determine if the employee is eligible. FML can be over a period of time, or it can be intermittent. And to be eligible for FMLA, they're going to have to be an employee for at least 12 months, have worked at least 1,250 hours. And then FMLA allows for 12 weeks of unpaid leave for the birth or adoption of a child, care of an immediate family member, or for your own medical leave for your serious health condition. And across your campuses, that FML is either going to take place in your HR office, or if we're looking at the University of Kentucky, they have their own FMLA office over at KCTCS. That process is going to start in HR, and then they have a third-party vendor who is actually going to take over at that point and make sure all the paperwork's in and that the employee is complying with requests for that FML.
I'm going to talk about reasonable accommodation in the context of disability and accommodation. And there's a reason this slide is blank and doesn't have words on it. And that's because we can't always see disability, or we can't always just know that somebody is struggling. It is the employee's responsibility to disclose if the employee has a disability that may need accommodation. However, that does not have to be in writing. It doesn't have to be a formal declaration. It often takes place just in conversation. And once the faculty lead is aware, they should work with HR to provide reasonable accommodation. This requires an interactive discussion with the employee, with the faculty lead, and with HR. Now, the little case study to share with you, it's not a post-secondary one, but it does show some of the pitfalls, and it's Yannick versus Kroger. Mary Ellen Yannick worked at a Kroger store for over 15 years, and in 2018, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was the bakery manager at that Kroger store. And meanwhile, after her diagnosis, the store manager felt the bakery was not meeting Kroger standards, and Ms. Yannick was not doing her job. And she gave her a list of daily duties and told her that she would face discipline and could be fired if she could not follow the list, and said maybe she should step down from her manager position. Well, Ms. Yannick was taking a 4-month medical leave and having surgery. And when she returned to work and told the manager, she told the manager, "I am struggling and need some time to get back to normal." That was the conversation she said. She further said that she had worked 53 hours on her first week back, which had been hard for her physically. The manager said again that if things continued, Ms. Yannick could be disciplined or fired, and she said that Ms. Yannick should step down. Ms. Yannick did eventually step down and started working as a bakery clerk at a different Kroger at less pay and with less authority. The question is, did Kroger fail to accommodate Ms. Yannick's disability under Title I of the ADA? The courts found that yes, they did. That they could have made flexible schedule is an easy accommodation to make, and they should have offered her a flexible schedule for her recovery, for her to get back to normal, and then they could have the discussion about whether she was able to perform those manager duties.
Okay, another issue that usually comes up is safety and workers' comp. In the event of an injury, making sure that the employee gets the medical assistant needed is the faculty, and that is your responsibility, and must file that first report of injury. In cases of drug and alcohol abuse, contact HR guidance before continuing or before confronting your employee. In addition to that first report of injury, you may have to complete an injury form for your safety office. It's important to complete that and forward that first report of injury to the designated individual as soon as possible. And we do that for a couple reasons. The first one is for a comprehensive recall of what has happened, because if that becomes a workers' comp case later on down the road, they're going to need to know every single detail. Typically, it is required that you file that first injury report within 3 days. And also keep in mind that your student workers who are receiving pay other than scholarships or fellowships or student loans or grants are generally considered employees. So this would be the same thing for those student workers that you might have in your offices. And if you do have a case of those with drug and alcohol abuse, many of our employee assistance plans are available to help you work through those issues. The employee assistance programs are typically free, and they will help you through these situations, and they are 100% confidential and a very helpful resource for you.
I'm going to talk about harassment. And harassment is conduct that is unwelcome or unwanted, offensive or threatening, and pervasive or severe enough that a reasonable person would find it objectionable. Harassment is about how it makes the recipient feel. It's not about the intention of the person doing it. People can do things that are found offensive and not be aware of it or thinking they were joking, but it would still be harassment. The recipient feels negative pressure because of gender, race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or some other distinguishing factor. If a person feels harassed, they should notify the person engaging in the behavior and ask them to stop it and tell them that it makes them feel uncomfortable or threatened. If the behavior does not stop, or if that employee feels that they can't confront that person, they should go to a faculty lead or a manager or HR for support. As the faculty lead, you must be prepared to intervene on behalf of the employee with support from HR. Now we're going to turn to performance. And in the modern workplace, especially in an academic setting, thinking should shift from an old-fashioned bureaucratic command and control model to an organic model, because the organic model fits better the work that we do. People are not just cogs in a machine. They're thinking people who can move along the goals of the organization. The organic model is really approachable through the work of Stephen Covey, and he has a book called Trust and Inspire. And what this organic model means is building a workplace that is based on vision, defines strengths that grow and improve our people, and create an organization that can be flexible and change as needed. Unlike command and control, it creates responsibility and ownership within the organization and moves management to sharing information and guiding and coaching people rather than controlling and commanding people what they should do. It also brings in the management principle of coordinating, or we more often call that collaboration. Your role as a manager is to create the environment where people can use the knowledge, abilities, and skills they bring to the workplace to put the vision of the organization into motion. With that in mind, you should think of performance evaluation as a growth opportunity for employees. At CPE, we use kind of a slimmed down version of catalytic coaching for our evaluation model. It's built from the job requirements, and it is a discussion about how the employee's work fits into the overall work of the organization. It allows for setting employee goals for areas where the employee can grow or improve performance, and goals built on the strengths the employees already have. It also asks the employee to identify professional development opportunities.
Okay, I know this is a lot of information, but we're moving right along, and we're going to talk about performance now. So it's been my experience with institutions I've worked with anyway, there are different performance models for staff versus faculty. Staff evaluations typically are created with employee and supervisors setting goals based on function and a rating scale. Usually there are meetings throughout the year to discuss those performance and determine if goals need to be adjusted. You may adjust those goals if for some reason in particular a goal couldn't be met due to priorities changing or workload changes. You know, we're all aware in a higher ed setting that, you know, we're in small offices and all of a sudden somebody's gone and you're picking up the pieces, or one person's picking up somebody else's pieces. So be aware of that and realize that you may have to adjust those goals at some point during the year so that we're not causing any harm to those employees who can't meet a particular goal because they're working on somebody else's workload as well. We want to always ensure that we're working toward the success of our employees because their success is your success. Faculty evaluations I've not had as much experience with, but typically it's my understanding that, the process varies somewhat from institution to institution based on whether you're on a tenured track or a non-tenured track, medical versus academic. And we'll typically look at your service, teaching, and research activities. So once you have all those goals and that performance put together, what if your employee's not performing as they needed? Again, this is an opportunity for employee development and growth. That discussion should be job related, expectations clearly stated. And here, communication is the key. Loop in HR. Put together a performance improvement plan with milestones and check-in dates. If the employee does not improve, document, contact HR for guidance. And hopefully we can get that employee up to speed where they need to be. And then the next step of this is professional development for you as supervisors. As a faculty lead, you should always seek out professional development opportunities, not just in your field of study, but in your role as managers and supervisors. If your institution offers training, please take it. Like I know there's a great supervision training at UK that's mandatory actually for supervisors. Western has a couple different programs. Murray State has a pretty robust workshop as well for supervisors. And most of your supervisor training that's going to be offered will touch on those things that Ray and I have discussed today: basic employment law, coaching help, discipline, and institutional processes, which are very important. So in all of these processes, please remember that HR and your legal staff are your partners. Your role as a faculty lead and a supervisor is to help create and communicate the vision for your department or your initiative, and then build growth and environment for your staff that will empower your staff to bring that vision to life. And finally, one of the best books I've read on leadership in many years is called The Leadership Challenge by James Kouzes and Barry Posner. They wrote, "Leadership is in the moment. There are many moments each day you can choose to lead, and many moments each day you can choose to make a difference. Each of these moments serves us the prospect of contributing to a lasting legacy." And I think that's what we need to keep in mind as we are working with our staffs and being leaders.
Thank you both very much. We've probably got a time for a couple questions. Are there any questions from participants? Well, if you do if you've got a question, you're more than welcome to send it to me, and I'll pass it on to our presenters, or you can contact them directly. Jill, do you have a thumbs up. All right, thank you both very much, Ray and Candy. I really appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move to a session now on building and maintaining teams. I am going to look for Dr. Feeney. Here we go. Dr. Feeney, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
You are a co-host now. Feel free to share your screen, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I'll be asking you some questions, so I hope that you are ready to participate a bit. And I appreciate that the majority of you have your cameras on, so it's good to see people when you're talking at the screen, as I'm sure that all of you know. So I think you have my bio, but I'm just going to briefly say I have been here at this college I'm in my 27th year, and I am in my first year of serving in this role as president of the college, but have had several others. I started as a faculty member and went here or there in the journey to end up here. And so what I am going to share with you today is informed mainly by my academic area, but also by that journey itself. So let me share my screen real quick, and I will jump into that. And I'm a Teams person, so I see it. I'm moving slow. Just give me a second. You see this first slide, correct? All right, I'm seeing a few head nods and teams, from my perspective, are a vital part of what we do in academia. And, I know by the point that all of you would be participating in a training like this is that you have enough experience to know that that is the case. And much of what we do is either enhanced by the teams that we are in, or I would argue is challenged by the teams that we are part of. And as we move up in leadership and end up where we are supervising others, our role in that team becomes more and more significant as we progress. And so I usually share that the test of our leadership actually comes down to when other people don't play by the rules. And actually, not playing by the rules should be in quotes, because the rules essentially are our expectations. And I know that all of you have done leadership style testing, probably for this group, as well as other things that you've participated in, and personality style and whatever. And all of those things, I'm a big fan of them from the standpoint that they help us not only understand ourselves, but also understand others and how we react to them. And that enforces what we perceive the rules are. So what it means to be professional, what our expectations are for individuals and how they complete a task, often says more about us and our expectations, or as much as it does about them. And so what's essential here is that, we are aware of this variable. And if we find ourselves getting frustrated, as you'll see when we get into this, is thinking about that process. So if everyone does what we think they should do, they contribute in the way that we think they should, these things are usually easier and possibly even a little bit more fun. The challenge comes when they don't. So I'm going to start by asking a few questions of you. So from your experience, what makes a strong team? So just unmute yourself. You don't have to raise your hand, just speak out.
Diversity of thought.
Diversity of thought.
Clear direction.
Being direct. Is that what someone said?
Clear directions.
Right.
Communication.
Cooperation.
Cooperation.
Having shared goals.
Shared goals. Vital. Anybody else? All right, so let's flip it. Oops. From your experience, what makes a team struggle?
A lack of clear goals.
Okay.
Lack of communication.
Okay.
I'm going to go to my favorite book on this, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Absence of trust or of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results.
Love it. Somebody said something as well. Sorry.
Well, I'll quote Michael Sorrell, president down in at Paul Quinn College. He says, "When me over we, then we don't have a team. But when we is over me, we have a strong team."
I like that. All right. Thank you for that. So my perspective is this, is with the appropriate mindset and tools, which for me is ongoing. This is developmental. I love that you guys are pulling in from other people, as well as other people's work as well. But with the appropriate mindset and tools, you can productively lead any team forward, create a strong climate, handle any conflict or any challenge that comes your way. So we're going to dive into this a bit. And so what we're going to examine in relation to meeting that goal, right, is just these 4 basic areas to address it. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that these things seem simple. So if we go back to the slide, you look at it, there's nothing here that I think is necessarily mind-shattering. But almost any book that I've read on leadership, conflict management, team management, anything in that realm, personality, interpersonal communication, relationships, whether it's business, whether it's home, they come down to basic principles. The power of various books is we all, depending on our style and who we are, we hear the message differently from different styles. So where you might resonate with one book or one presenter, I might resonate or attach more to another. And really, though, if we break down those messages and get beyond how it's delivered, there's often a lot of similarity and come down to these basic skills. But if it was easy in relation to these basic skills, you know, kind of the extreme is we'd have world peace. And I would argue the main reason we are nowhere near that is that communication is both an art and a science. So you will hear stuff today that is backed by research, and we know that works in creating a strong team. You've already heard some of it from your colleagues as they were pulling from other folks, but you have to be able to apply that, and that is the art. So knowing it is one thing, applying it is another, and that is 99.99999% of the time when we mess it up. And that's all of us. People that have studied this forever are usually good at it, but not always good at it. And the part that messes that up is all the personality variables that are in the mix, our mood, the stressors we have in our life, and what else is going on. So it just reinforces, I wanted to reinforce kind of the art and the science nature of it. So I am, as I said before, I am used to teams. And so what I'm seeing right now is not what I usually see in teams. So I need you to just speak up if you have a question, all right? Because I don't want to miss anybody. Won't bother me in the least bit if I'm like all excited and just rambling on with it and you completely interrupt me. But if you have a question, you think something is crap, you don't think it's interesting, or you want more depth on it, I encourage you to interrupt and let's talk about it. Usually that's when it gets really interesting. So I encourage you to ask questions at any point. So the first principle that I want to talk about in relation to these communication skills is it's not always about you. And one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make, particularly when they're in a supervisory role or when they're maybe not supervising everyone, but they're leading a team or an initiative, is that if somebody doesn't do something or they don't do something that you think they should, we own it. And so one of the worst things we can do in these roles is take anything personally. Even if folks are rude to us or they behave unprofessionally, it's not about us, it's about them. And so it's working to understand them. Now we are a variable, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the more that we own stuff, the more that we take it personally, the less clarity we are going to have in focusing on what our goals are and staying focused on those. So by not taking it personally, by understanding it's part of this is what people bring to the table, it helps us stay focused on the perspective, on the goal, and also to understand them better and to learn over time what are the challenges for particular folks. What are the words that we use that they are sensitive to? What are the topics that come up that they have a harder time or it's more stressful for them to talk about? Like, for example, people often I have seen, have less of a problem talking about planning for a big event. And there's more conflict that arises when we're talking about budget and who's getting what. So it often varies by topic. But it's, a guiding principle is it's not about you. So if things are getting intense, it's your job to manage that. Now, what I love about interpersonal communication leadership is it's full of contradictions. So first one is it's not about you. You already know probably what the second one is, and that is it's all about you. And so I kind of do this in a fun way, but the point here is, first part is understanding the other. And the personality and the leadership style tests that we take help us do that. Also, what it does is working with folks. So you can have 2 or 3 people of the same classification in personality or leadership style, and they still are not always on the same page, or they don't react to everything the same. So the more that knowledge we gain in working with them and understanding them, the more effective we are. And it's also the same about ourselves, a matter of our perception. What are we comfortable with? What are the things that we're least comfortable with? If I go back to those same topics, some folks are more comfortable with planning than they are budget. Budget might be their weak spot. What's important is to know that about yourself, understand it, obviously work to be better, but make sure you have strong budget people on your team. We don't have to be the expert in everything, but it is about being honest with ourselves and knowing what our strengths are and what are not. And the other is, most of us, being human, have triggers. Most of us are more sensitive to some things, some topics, as well as some people. I know that when certain people walk in my office, I am more aware of my verbal and nonverbal communication, my tone and stuff with them, because I don't find them as joyful to interact with as I might somebody else. And right or wrong, if we're honest with ourselves on that, then we have more of an opportunity to control our behavior and making sure we are being as fair and consistent and productive as possible in our messages. If we deny that we have any of those issues, it's when we're more likely to make those mistakes. So it's an awareness factor. Also, to be open to feedback as far as how we come across. Strengths, weaknesses, what pushes your button. So I've been in Kentucky for 30 years, but when I first moved here, one of the reasons why I would hear every so often someone would say to me is, "Oh, you're from the North." And it was because I tend to be a little bit more direct than some of my colleagues. So I could have been defensive over that and protected it and just like, this is wrong. Or I could have understood that's how some folks are seeing me. There's going to be some situations and events that's going to be helpful, but there's also going to be some where that might get in the way. So it's working to understand yourself, who your audience is, and what is the best way to strengthen that team, promote conversation. So it's first part was knowing others, working to understand them and not owning their behavior. Second part is working to understand yourself. If something doesn't go well, what was your part in that? If something did go well, what was your part in that? The more that you understand that, the more likely you are to be better in the future. Third variable is language and power. So powerful speech is more likely to lead to desired results. And, what I want to emphasize with this clearly, and I usually bring up this topic, this point when I'm talking about this topic, is this isn't about being overly authoritative. It's about clarity. But knowledge is power. And so there's a fine line. I mean, some people would argue all communication is persuasion, all communication is manipulation, and it's about getting your goals. But to some extent, we lean either one way or the other as far as, is it altruistic, as far as wanting to reach a good conclusion that's for the best of everyone that is involved in relation to meeting our goals, or is it more about self-serving? So what I am talking about here is kind of the philosophical approach from more of the altruistic side of it. And so What I'm speaking of is if you want something, if you need something, be clear in saying it. One of the mistakes that leaders often make is they hint so much, they leave the group confused and they end up getting wonky results, and they're frustrated with their group that they got wonky results, not recognizing the role that they played in it in what question it was that they were asking. The other big item is, which I think most of us have had experience with, is that folks feel ignored. We ask their opinion, we get their opinion, we quickly make the decision, and it's done. So what I emphasize here is this: if you want their opinion, consider it and ask it. If you can't take their opinion into account, you know the answer, be very careful in asking. Don't ask just to say you asked. If you know what the conclusion is and you know what the answer needs to be because of some outside decision, budget related, whatever it is. But be prepared to explain why it can't be that way, right? So for example, if it relates to budget, you simply say, this relates to budget. This is what we need to do for now. We can spend time examining what we can do in the future. But that creates more trust in the team if we're authentic, we're transparent, we're not asking for stuff just so we can say what we asked. And if we ask and they lean one way and then we learn information during the process and we have to ignore that, be transparent on why. And even if it's like, say, for example, it's a personnel thing and you can't disclose it, you don't get into what the details were, but you say, there's been some stuff that has come up that relates to personnel. I can't go there right now, but this is why we need to do this. But transparency is vital here. And so in the language we use, in order for it to have integrity and maintain or strengthen that strong team, it's vital that you go there. Another thing is this: when you're in discussion, think about what your language implies. Does it show bias? Does it show value and respect for the range of ideas, right? Or are you immediately shutting someone off? I have seen again and again where people bring up a topic and I can tell right from the beginning how the discussion is going to go because everyone in the group reports to this person and that person has already revealed how they think about it and therefore implying the direction they want it to go. And you have a lot of followers that no longer offer their expertise outside of they know how to support their boss. And so if you're asking the question, think about how you're asking it from the standpoint of you are getting authentic input, the expertise of who your team is. So if you approach it from that standpoint, you're much more likely to get what you're paying for. We have these incredible people we've hired, these folks that we have pulled in. We may not be on the same page. That's a good thing. We need to, have all these alternate perspectives. So this is just emphasizing to be careful with how you bring things up, because with that, whether you recognize it or not, you have a great deal of power. I learned in every role I've been in, and I'm learning it again in this role, is somebody might ask me what I think, and then I've learned the mistake in saying that too early, because all of a sudden I hear people saying, well, President Feeney thinks this, President Feeney thinks this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, right? Rather than saying, if somebody asks me that question, I really want to know where people are at. If that's what I want, and if that's where we're at, and that's what we get to do. It's important I don't identify that, because if I do, somebody who might have spoken up is no longer going to do that. So the power of positive language, my slant on this is use language that promotes conversation, that is authentic, meaning if you want an opinion, ask it. If you don't have the luxury of asking that, then don't. So it's about being and using language that makes it okay for people to speak up and disagree if you're in that setting where they do. The fourth thing is this: when we are in teams, and any team, I would argue, whether we are leading it or not, but if you are leading it, you have the ultimate responsibility of this. Assume agency for making it better. So don't blame your team members. Don't, you're as good as only your weakest link. To some extent, we can argue and debate that. But the other is this: to me, that's an excuse. If we are strong leaders, we should have the ability to pull everyone in. If someone's destructive, then we talked about this, somebody hinted at it before, we need to hold them accountable. And it could be that we need to make a change with that. But ultimately, it's up to us to ensure what it is. Assume agency. So you take responsibility for not just taking the high road, but making sure that whatever the group should be, you are demonstrating that behavior and you're leading the group from the standpoint that every perspective is valued. Questions or comments on that quick ramble before I move into the next part?
On the topic about language, you reminded me of something I've heard numerous times from military officers. When the commanding officer muses about taking tea in the afternoon, his sergeant goes and gets the tea.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. Military makes me think of another variable that I usually bring up here is that there is a time to be direct, right? So like, say, for example, if there's an accident or, you know, we need a very quick answer, we have something that's going to happen within a few minutes. Oftentimes things come up last minute and we don't have the luxury of time. My advice is this: when you need to be direct, but also take the time after, especially if you feel like it's ruffled a few feathers, to do the follow-up and explain why you weren't as inclusive as you normally would be. So that there are times we can't have the, you know, let's sit in a circle and have the conversation on every single topic that comes up. There's times that we just need to move forward. Any other comments?
Yeah. I also had a question. I'm sorry, Brad, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. In the article on becoming an emotionally intelligent leader, I really liked at the end where they gave, they asked the faculty and staff a survey, 3 questions. What should I stop doing? What should I start doing? What should I keep doing? Add just when you're engaging with people and parts of a team or beyond, and you want to get that feedback, do you recommend that that's anonymous at some point, or people can attach their name to it?
So that's always a question that comes up when we survey folks, and I vary it a little bit by topic. I usually try to give that option of it being anonymous on a lot of the feedback type stuff that we ask our folks. One of the reasons why I like to provide the option for people to identify who they are as well is so we can follow up with them if we have questions to more fully understand it. And that's how I bring it up in the beginning. And I can say from a couple items, like we did a survey of our faculty and some concerns this past year. And we probably followed up on 4 or 5 of them and had really good conversations and got a lot more depth on the feedback because we were able to follow up. But that trust factor has to be there. So if you're going to allow people to do that, and then you are showing aggravation or punishing someone who said something you don't like, or you're defensive over it and pushing back, you've typically done, you know, someone would do more damage in that situation than any good. So, you know, I have found every situation, like most of us, right, who have taught in the classroom or any sort of survey, you don't focus on the good stuff, you focus on those bad ones, and they're the ones that you struggle with. For me, nothing has changed in this journey. As I get, you know, to this level, I, you know, receive a lot of positive feedback, but it's the other that bothers me. So, but what I've learned to do over time is that that's authentic feedback, and I need to think about it and going back to assuming agency, what I can do, what I can control to influence the situation. And if somebody has put their name there, to follow up with them and get more detail on it and get their perspective. And if somebody hasn't, is just to be mindful that that's the perception of some folks and what I can do about it. And if it's something I can't control, I work on it. That's my opportunity for professional development. If I can't control it, then I might work it into a presentation where I was asked this and I can't control that. And here's why it can't be controlled. Because that budget comes from the state. It doesn't come from, right? I mean, whatever it might be, but I do give it attention and I give it in a respectful way, even though in my mind, I'm human too. And I may be like, seriously, I'm being asked this again and it needs to be addressed. But you know, the deal is if it does, it does. Good questions. Anything else?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a quick question about language.
When you're talking about that, are you thinking in terms of verbal communication where you might have things like, facial expressions, demeanor, things like that, as well as like text-based communication where maybe you lose some of that nuance? Are both of those included in what you're talking about?
Yes, it's all the above. So context matters and delivery matters. And with delivery, I mean that both in the nonverbal element when you're in front of somebody, as well as the mode in which you deliver it. So for example, if I get a text that I perceive, and it may not be because personality and styles vary in communication. If I get a text that I perceive as intense in any way, whether it's insulting, whether it's aggravating, whatever it is, I always call. I never text back. And if I have the luxury of being on the same campus and I have the luxury of time, I often will walk over or text the person and say, if I don't have time, I would love to discuss this in person. And my assistant will reach out to you to try to schedule a time. So because I think you've brought up a really good point, how we bring it up matters. And as we all learn, the more that we get to know folks, and particularly our own teams that we work with and lead, I know that some of my team members do really well texting and email. Others do much better with a phone call or in person, particularly if it's something challenging or I'm going to give them constructive feedback or we have to work through something difficult. So part of it is none of these are right or wrong. It's understanding each other's styles and what leads to the best results, the most productive results. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I'm going to try to buzz through because I know I'm getting near the end of my time. Conflict is inevitable. And I would say this, not only is it inevitable, conflict can be a really good thing. If you're, I would encourage you to think about if you don't have conflict in a group, are you really talking about important things that matter at the institution? And is your team diverse and well-rounded enough? Because if you're never experiencing conflict, I would be concerned about groupthink. I would be concerned about the diversity of expertise that you have. So conflict is an important part. We're all typically a little nervous about it because when we think of conflict, we think about arguments or fighting. And so in order for it not to be too damaging, one is, I think, to exemplify when there's a disagreement, how we act with grace, how we act with interest in wanting to hear the other's perspective. We recognize that it's dynamic. For example, if we have one conflict as a group and it goes well, it means that the next conflict is likely to go well also, based on that first one. Now, it may be a trickier topic, but it's still more likely to do well. The reverse is also true. If we have conflict that doesn't go well, you'll start to see more avoidance. You'll start to see people not wanting to speak up because of how badly something went. So conflict is a very powerful thing as far as whether or not groups are strong or not. And we get the benefit of everyone's expertise. There's proactive things that we can do and reactive. So proactive is obviously anything we can do ahead of time. That reactive is conflict's going to happen. How do we handle it in that moment? And so we have basically five outcomes. One is in any conflict, if you have a difference of mind, it's either they change, you both change, somebody gets out. And we see this all the time. One of the number one reasons people leave an organization, whether it's academic or not, often has nothing to do with pay. I mean, good pay is nice, and good pay can be attractive somewhere else. But people also stay because they're really happy. And so what that means is the opposite of that is they're leaving because they're unhappy. And that often relates to one of those first three that wasn't a satisfaction, or that last one. I've seen this a lot where, nothing changes. People just bicker at each other, they bite at each other, and the ship just keeps moving. But if you think about how strong we could be, it gets in the way. So I would argue that the more that we manage this, the better it is. And one of the most productive things you can do in relation to this, and all of this, somebody brought up EQ or earlier. This is applying this, the how is all EQ. But climate, and I'm going to speed up here because of just time. But if you look at everything under evaluation, those behaviors are more likely to promote a negative climate.
Excuse me, Greg. Jill has a question.
Okay, so from a proactive standpoint, the opposite side is everything on that other side is more likely to have a positive climate. Thank you for interrupting. Yep.
I just have a question. I feel like lately, I have been in several meetings where, I'm trying to go in with sort of like an open mind on how things can best work together. I feel like one of my strengths is the ability to bring people together to compromise for things. But I have had, I've had a few instances lately in the last year or so where I feel like there are just some people coming in that have no interest in any amount of compromise or any amount of coming in with like an open mind to different things. I'm sort of at a loss sometimes on what to do with that. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on sort of what to do if you feel like somebody's sort of, for lack of a better term, like bullying through a situation where they're just not going to be helpful. And no matter what's going on, it seems like they don't change.
So I'm going to ask you a question or two, and then we'll probably get into some hypotheticals. But
Sure.
Do you have any control over who's in the group and who's not?
No, I've usually sort of been the one who's sort of brought the people to the table together.
Okay, and then once they're at the table together, that's kind of the assignment. And if someone's behaving in that way, they're there at the table regardless of what you think or would like to decide.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm gonna make a little bit of a joke here, but I've said when I've been, and my kids are adults now, so I feel better about joking about this, but we had three kids. One of the three kids made me a better parent. And they made me a better parent because I had to learn a lot. And they tested my skill set because they didn't meet my expectations of what the rules are, right? So if we go back to the beginning, if everybody plays by the rules, the first two kids played by my rules, right? So it was easy. I was a great parent. The last one did not play by my rules. So I had to learn to in order to be a good parent for that kid, I had to change a little bit of who I was and learn to parent them differently to where, my expectations were clear, but they were clear to them and what those were. So I have been on several groups where I feel like my skill set is tested by what you just described. And so on one extreme, if those options aren't there, like you change, they change, you both change, you're down to those last two options, right? Either you get out or it just stays the same. But even if it stays the same, and I've been in groups that are like this, where there's just difficult members, I think about what I can control. And so as an example, we have an individual here that I work with. They're not in my direct, they're not one of my direct reports. Their communication style is typically hyper aggressive. Now, what I value about this individual, they are usually spot on with what they're bringing up. So the what, I agree, because they've done their homework, they've done the research. It's not just, I think, they're backing it with data. But the way that they deliver it is so abusive. And what I started doing a few years ago, in addition to coaching this person outside the room, meeting with them one-on-one, if you really want to make a difference, here's my advice. But when they would speak up and say something, if I were in the meeting, whether I was leading it or not, I would say, I think what so-and-so meant to say or intended to say, or the message behind what was just said is this. The first time I did that, the person said, is that not what I said? And the whole room laughed because they really didn't hear that part of it. And so, but sometimes I think people do hear it. And that's just who they are. And they're aggressive, but you still think about assume agency, control what you can control. So that's paraphrasing them. That's taking care of people, sticking up for them if they're the target. And so if we have the opportunity to where we control the group, I have said to people before, if you're not going to behave in this particular way, where at least you're showing value and respect, I'm not talking about agreeing. I'm talking about showing value and respect for your colleagues. I'm going to need you to step away from this group. But if you don't have that influence, it's to bring that up and to call the person out if it's appropriate for you to call the person out. And if it's not, due to power dynamics, that you check into people, assume agency, and take care of them. It just demonstrates the messy part of it. And we don't have absolute control in these situations. And so because we don't, we have to look at all these variables and know who we are and operate with integrity and control what we can control. And that's often more than what we realize. You know, it's beyond the formal realms of, well, I'm not the chair of this committee, so I'm not going to worry about it. If I'm on a committee member, I know that I'm a variable, and does everybody in this committee have voice? And so if the chair doesn't, I might be, you know, we haven't heard from so-and-so. They've been pretty quiet. Can we hear from them for a bit? I might be the one that said that. And so there's ways that we can assume agency, take control, or use our control and try to make it as best as it can be. It might not be perfect. It might not be the ideal thing, but we're making it as best as it can be. Does that help you a little bit?
Yes, it actually does. One of the things I've been concerned about is how do I sort of definitively stop that? And I think one of the things I need to get better at is being more direct in those moments. So I do very much appreciate what you've said. Thank you.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've had outside meetings with colleagues before too, when we were at the same level or they were even ahead of me, and just said, you know, not in front of everyone, but when I hear you talk like that, sometimes it kind of throws me, because the message gets lost with me because I feel like you're abusive. Oftentimes, you know, you'll learn at least who that person is. If they're shocked by it, then you know it's more of a style thing. And I'm always more hopeful in those situations, because some folks just don't, the EQ is not there, right? They're brilliant, but the EQ is not there. But sometimes what you can learn in other situations is there might even be a little bit of smile, and there's some people that like turmoil and they like to create it.
So if I could offer to Greg here, related to what Jill is asking, another technique I use also is maybe just have a meeting, not a meeting, like a formal, informal conversation with that person before the meeting. That's something I do also sometimes, because I know this is somebody, like you said, Greg, great ideas, you know, spot on, but when they deliver the message, yeah, that's not, people don't hear the message because of how it's delivered.
Yeah.
So just have a conversation with them, talk to them, explain, you know, what you're trying to achieve, just make sure they get it. Then when you go to the meeting, what I've found is that makes it much easier to manage the process.
And then, you know, a good ethical question is, how far do you step in, right? So do you go to the person's supervisor? Do you go to HR? You know, if I'm relating this to even the previous conversation that we had, if somebody is that you had, the previous presenter, if someone's being abusive, you know, most of us take these trainings and we go through these and we know what our formal responsibility is, but also beyond that, like, what's the right thing? So I always think the right thing is to start with the individual. But if that person's not, and no one else is doing about it, do we become just another witness of that type of abusive behavior? Or do we try to do something about it? And for me, you know, what it comes down to almost always is, in academia, voice is a powerful thing, right? It's a meaningful thing. It's a meaningful thing to our faculty and to our staff that they have a voice. And what I have found in my years, it's not, administration is a variable, but they definitely are not the only variable. Colleagues are also a variable in how strong or how limited voice is. And the more that we approach it from that dynamic standpoint, the stronger of a team and the stronger of an institution we're going to have. So I'm going to pause here and ask if we are too far beyond time. From my perspective, it's been somewhat meaningful. I'm glad to come back and talk a little bit more. The rest of the slides are there. There were some scenarios, but I also want to, it's a Friday afternoon. I know there's more lined up and I want to be respectful.
Thank you very much, Greg. We really appreciate it. We may ask you back for another session. There's been a lot of Q&A about this, so we've got some times built in through the year where there's some, for lack of a better term, vacancies. So this might be a good topic to revisit. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation. There's been a lot of feedback, which is lovely.
Awesome. And if any of you need anything, I think you have my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you very much. We're going to move now to a discussion on peace and navigating conflict. Dr. Lavina Wilkin is joining us from Sullivan University. Good afternoon, Dr. Wilkin.
Hi, how is everyone?
I have made you a co-host and you are ready to start your screen or start sharing.
Right. I'm used to Teams, so if I mess this up, I apologize. My top banner is hidden, so I can't see how to make it a slideshow. So I'm just going to go through with it like this, if that is okay with everyone. Let me see if I can move it. I will, but
if you want to do a slideshow on the bottom of your screen, on the bottom right where it's 58%, the little thing that looks like a box on a stand to the left of the slide.
Oh, got it. Right there?
I think so.
Thank you. I told Sheila earlier that technology is not my strength. And today, as it would happen, I get up this morning, I log into my computer and I go into Teams, and both my microphone and my speaker are gone. And so it was a little challenging. It caused me some conflict, but thank you all for being here today. You know, listening to President Feeney speak and his presentation, I just got in on a little bit of the last part of it. It was amazing. And so much of what I'm going to talk about really is hand in glove to his presentation. So, you know, a lot of times when we think about conflict, we do think about those negative aspects of it. We think about fighting and arguing and the stress that it causes us. So one of the things that I'd really like for us to start thinking about is we all have conflict in our lives. If I do this presentation in person, I ask people who don't have any conflicts to raise their hands, and that rarely happens. And if it does happen, I'd like to ask that person sitting beside them to please take their pulse, because we all have conflict. But what we've learned to believe about conflict is that it's negative. And what I want to say is it really is not positive or negative, but it's how we deal with those conflicts that make the outcomes positive or negative. And conflict is really just a symptom that something isn't working. And it is our opportunity to change those things and to make things better, whatever it is that isn't working. So why should we care about conflict within our organizations and within our universities? There are lots of reasons, but here are just 6 of the top ones that I came up with. Wasted time is number 1. It has been estimated that a manager will spend about 40 to 60% of his or her time dealing with conflicts. And if you're spending that much time dealing with conflict, there's a lot of other things about your job that you're not able to do. Add to that the fact that if the manager is really not well versed in conflict management, they may just escalate the problem and make things worse. There's also a loss of skilled employees or skilled volunteers in organizations. And it's the good people who leave because they can, because they are the ones who have the skills and can go to another university or another organization. it costs the university increased health cost, especially when the university is paying health insurance premiums. And there's lots and lots of research out there that says that stress causes illnesses. So those health insurance premiums can go up. Absenteeism is another cost. People just don't want to deal with it, so they decide to take a mental health day. They don't go in that day. Presenteeism is another cost. It is where they go into work, but they just do the bare minimum and they're not really productive. So presenteeism is also an additional cost of unmanaged conflicts. Lawsuits can be filed when people think that no one is listening to what they have to say, no one is listening to their side of a story. Sometimes the only person who is listening is the legal system. And we all know that when lawsuits are filed, pretty much the only people who win those are the attorneys. And then in worst case scenarios, workplace violence. There's so much. I mean, I know that many of you may remember the term going postal, and that term was coined because there's so much workplace violence at the post office. And so I won't go into it because I don't have a lot of time today, but one of the things that the post office did was they actually instituted an internal transformative mediation program to help deal with those internal conflicts, because they knew that what they were doing was not working. So they had to find a better way. So what I'd like for us to think about today is a little bit of a paradigm shift away from that traditional view of conflict, of struggle and resentment and competition, and look at the new view of conflict as it is an opportunity to change things that aren't working. It's an opportunity for us to learn to communicate better and to trust and to work together to solve problems and to appreciate the differences rather than to pick on those other people. You know, we talked a little bit about bullying. So it's really just appreciating the diversity of ideas. My peace model of conflict management came about through a research study that I did. And my conflict style in my entire life was conflict avoidance. In 1998, I decided to purchase the construction company where I started working when I was 17 years old. I'd worked there for 23 years. They were getting ready to sell it. I thought, I can do this. And so I bought it. And I bought it at the time with the person who was my husband. And as that escalated into a lot of conflict. And in addition, I would go into meetings and I wasn't your traditional construction company owner. So I knew early on in the ownership that I had to find a better way to deal with conflict. Avoidance was not going to work for me. I was responsible for the livelihood of 20 to 25 employees and their families. I was responsible for about several $1 million in contracts. I had to find a better way. And so when I started learning about and taking classes on conflict management, it was this epiphany, like the light bulb went off. And as often happens when we learn something new, we want to share it with everybody. So I wanted to know if I was going to teach conflict management, what would be the most important precepts or concepts that I could really make a difference and help people who were struggling with conflict like I was. And so from that research, I came up with 5 different areas. The first is perception clarification. The E is empathetic listening. The A is appreciating diversity. The C is collaborative problem solving. And then the final E is emotional intelligence. And I know you all read a very good article on that. So perception clarification. If you look at these 2 pictures, what do you see? You can tell me.
I see a frog.
You see a frog? Okay. Do you see a horse in that picture?
I do not.
Okay.
I see a horse.
Okay. What about the picture of the woman?
There you go.
It's a either a young woman or an older woman, depending on how you look at it.
Yes. Does everybody see the old and the young woman? Okay, I won't spend a lot of time with that, but the point is whether you see the horse or the frog, they're both there. And whether you can see the young woman or the old woman and you can't see the other, they're both there. And perception clarification is so important because we do view the world through different lenses. And I present the peace model as separate concepts, but they're really all tied together. Several years ago, I was going to visit someone's office on campus, and outside of the office, there was a whiteboard. And there was a lot of writing on it, but the one thing that caught my eye was LW, Dingbat of the Week. And I was very taken aback by that. I thought, I wonder what I did to become the Dingbat of the Week. And instead of doing what I would suggest everybody do and knock on the door and go in and have that conversation, I kind of had my feelings hurt, that emotional piece of it. So I walked away and I had my feelings hurt. Then I got a little upset. I got a little angry. Started to think about, well, we work really well together. Is that going to hurt our working relationship? And then I thought, maybe there's another LW. So I go into Campus Nexus at the time, and I look to see if there's another faculty member with those initials. There was not. So I sent the woman an email and just said, I was outside of your office. I saw that on the whiteboard, and I just want to understand. Really should have picked up the phone and called. I really should have knocked on the door and gone in, but I didn't do any of those things. So I get in the car, I'm on my way home, and my phone rings, and it's her. And she tells me, she explains to me what has happened and that it's not me, that there's somebody else who, they really shouldn't have written it on the whiteboard. But the point of that story is, here I saw it with my own eyes. There are my initials. And then the emotional response that I had. And then I verified it, really, I thought. And it wasn't that situation at all. And so many times that's what we do in conflicts. We don't clarify the perception of what we see. And so it can exacerbate or escalate that conflict. So that's why perception clarification is truly one of the most important things that we can do when we are in a conflict situation. The E is empathetic listening. And sometimes we think that listening is taking turns talking. And while you're talking, I'm simply sitting here thinking about how I'm going to respond. And if I'm doing that, then I'm not really engaged in the listening, and I miss a lot of it. So it's so important to listen to understand and not just listen to respond. And one of the things that I've learned as far as empathetic listening that it's really important to do is to practice the platinum rule. Most of us know what the golden rule is, to treat other people the way we want to be treated. But the platinum rule takes it in a tiny little different direction. An example of that is that, let's say I don't really enjoy or like public accolades. If I've done some publication or presentation in a faculty meeting, I don't want to be called out for that. So I assume that the faculty who work for me feel the same way. And if they've done something spectacular, had an article published or, written a book or done something, I don't bring that up in the meeting because I wouldn't want that brought up, but they do. And so it's really about treating people the way they want to be treated, rather than assuming that they want to be treated the way I want to be treated. And the way we find that out is we ask, we have conversations, we communicate. And so I think that that part of empathetic listening is just so important. This next slide, to me, embodies what listening is about. We listen with our ears, but we also listen with our eyes, that nonverbal communication. And that can oftentimes tell us so much more than just the speaking can. It's also providing the undivided attention and listening with our heart, really, really being engaged in the conversation. So how do we become a better listener? Some of the things that we can do is, as people are speaking, we can refrain from judging. And as President Feeney talked about, it's knowing that, realizing I have a bias about this. So refrain from judging as they're speaking. Embrace emotions. And I don't mean emotions gone wild, but embrace emotions because they are information. They give us knowledge. Really focus on the speaker and what that person is saying to us, but listen to understand. Be engaged in the conversation. Clarify what you've heard by reframing or paraphrasing, and then thank the speaker for being, part of this conversation and being willing to have that communication with you. The A is appreciating diversity. And when I'm talking about diversity here, what I feel like it's not just diversity as we typically understand it, race, age, gender, ethnicity, but appreciate the diversity of values and ideas and experiences and knowledge that people bring to the table. And it's also important to understand and to appreciate our different conflict styles, our different communication styles, and the different strengths that we have. I learned the hard way that I'm a very indirect communicator. That has changed over the years, but when I first got into the field of conflict management, I didn't even know that I didn't answer a question. I just ask another question, or I just skirted around it. An example of that is when he started dating, my husband called me and asked me if I wanted to go to dinner. And my response to him was, I had lunch. And he said, I had lunch too, but I'm still going to dinner. Do you want to go? Here's the problem with indirect communication, especially if you're in a conversation with a direct communicator. Well, there are lots of problems, but here are a couple. If you're indirect, you're really not getting your message across, and the other person is not a mind reader. So it's so important as the communicator, as the speaker, to make sure that you get your message across. If somebody's a direct communicator, they may sound as though they're very brash or abrasive, and those two styles can clash. The other thing is, if somebody has the perception, that perception clarification, if somebody has the perception that if you are not answering the question directly, maybe you're hiding something, that can also hurt the trust in the relationship. So when we appreciate the diversity that people have, we can really work to create a psychologically safe space for open dialogue where people feel as though they can share experiences, they can share ideas, and they can do that without judgment. So Sheila asked me to talk a little bit to take the Clifton strengths and to talk about it. And I was not at all surprised about my top 5: connectedness, positivity, being a developer, liking harmony, and being empathetic. I feel like we are all connected in some way to something larger. And I really enjoy and like building bridges with people and helping them to focus on similarities, but also to appreciate the differences that they have. And I think that our success really depends on all of us working together. That absolutely we need to have that positive conflict, because as President Feeney said, if we have no conflict, or really is what we're doing important, or are we addressing it? And probably not. It's probably simmering under the surface. And what I've experienced with that, if we are not addressing the conflict, if we're conflict avoidant, sooner or later, it's going to explode in probably a pretty ineffective way and at an inappropriate time. So I am an optimistic person. When I was going through graduate school, I think my fellow students, classmates called me Pollyanna, because I always like to see the positive. I like to see the good in people. I like to see the positive in a situation. And I'm really, at my work and what I do, I've put together this wonderful team, and I'm so grateful for them. And I try to let them know that all the time, that I'm grateful for what they do. I'm grateful for their help. And I'm here to help them in any way that I can for them to develop and to grow into the roles that they're in. I also value harmony. That's the peace model. I value peace. And I like to now look at conflict as an opportunity for growth. And I'll be just honest with you, there are some times when I still don't want to engage in that conflict, but I do. And I still go back to my core conflict style of avoidance, but I do engage in it. And I do try to help people work through the conflicts that they have. And then empathy. I've learned that when I am mindful and aware of my own emotions and the emotions of others, those tensions can be reduced. And it's a matter of talking about them, thinking about them, engaging in a conversation about them. So those are my top 5. I like this quote by a guy named Bob Wall. He says that each of us has 2 people inside of us, the person that we think we are, and then there's the evil twin that everybody else has to work with. So part of that has to do with conflict styles. They're basically, I could do a whole session on conflict styles, but they're basically 5. Avoidance, that's the turtle. The problem with avoidance is that it's a lose-lose outcome. We're not addressing the issue, so we're not advancing the relationship, and we're not resolving the conflict. Then there's the accommodator, that's the teddy bear, the person who really values harmony above all else, and they will give up their own needs to make sure that somebody else's needs are met. There's the competer, which is sort of like that shark, is a lose-lose, where they want to win at all costs. Oh, sorry, I went too far. And then there's the compromiser, or the fox, that most of us have been taught that compromising is the best way to solve a problem. I would argue that a little bit, because with compromise, I get 50% of what I want, you get 50% of what you want, and neither of us get our needs met. So there are ways to work together, and maybe not get all of our needs met, but we get our top needs met, the things that are most important to us. And that's collaborating. So collaborating works for win-win outcomes. The main thing about collaborative problem solving is to solve the conflicts at the area and the level at which they occur. Talk to the person you are in conflict with. Don't go talk to somebody else, because they can't help you solve it. Talk to the person that you have that conflict with. Solve it when it happens. Separate the problem from the person. And this sounds, and a lot of times people say, well, the problem is the person, and if that person wasn't here, we'd have no problem. That's really not the case. Focus on what you can change and what you can fix. And you can't fix people, but you can fix problems. And so many times when I've consulted with organizations, they end up firing a certain person because they feel like that person is the problem. And what they do is they hire the same exact person in a different body, because they haven't solved the problem. So focus on the problem, focus on the things that are happening and what you can fix and what you can resolve. Also focus on interest and not positions. This is a little tricky one for conflict management. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by focusing on interest and not positions. The example that I oftentimes give is that there's a big state dinner, and there are 2 chefs. One is working on creating an entree. One is working on creating a dessert. They both need an orange. There's only one orange. What do? And oftentimes people say, well, you compromise, you cut it in half. That's where I say that's not a great solution, because if you need a whole orange for your entree or an entire orange for your dessert and you only get half, neither of those would be very good. So in that example, you really ask the question, well, why do you need the orange? I need the pulp of the orange for the sauce. Well, I need the zest of the orange to make my dessert. So I can have 100% of the pulp and 100% of the zest. We haven't compromised, we've collaborated, and we've solved the problem. So in that example, the interest is the orange, and the position is what you say you need. So it's not what you say you need, it's what you really do need. And it's asking those questions to get there. And you find that common ground through constructive dialogue. So collaborative problem solving really does include things like listening, being empathetic, understanding, and really caring. You care about what the other person has to say, and you're looking for and searching for those common interests. So the common interest being not that I need the entire orange, but what part of it do I need to have my needs fulfilled? And that might be asking that question of help me to understand. And that's a great icebreaker to start the process of collaborative problem solving. And then the E is emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is just the ability to monitor your own emotions and the emotions of others, and to understand those feelings and to discriminate among them so that you can use those emotions as information. I read somewhere that emotions are windows to that person's inner core. So when you see those emotions, you know what's happening inside that person. Every conflict has an element of emotion, or we wouldn't care about it to escalate it to the level of a conflict. And so it's really, really important to understand what those emotions are and understand your own emotions and not allow people to push your buttons. Because if people have worked with you for a while or know you pretty well, they know exactly what to say or do to push those buttons. And so it's important not to allow them to do that. The characteristics of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, and people who are high in emotional intelligence are self-aware. They understand feelings, but they're not ruled by those feelings. They know their own strengths and weaknesses. And self-awareness, I think, really underpins the whole idea of emotional intelligence. It's also about self-regulation, and that is the ability to control your own emotions and your own impulses. You make thoughtful decisions, but they're not impulsive. And you're comfortable with change, but you have the integrity and the ability to say no if you need to say no. The third aspect of emotional intelligence is motivation. And most of the time, people with a high degree of emotional intelligence are also highly motivated. They're willing to maybe defer immediate results for long-term results. They're productive. They might love a challenge, and they're usually very effective in the things that they do. And then there's empathy. And I think possibly empathy is the second most important aspect of emotional intelligence. And it really is the ability to identify and understand the wants and the needs and the viewpoints and the experiences and the perceptions of people around them. People who are empathetic are really good at recognizing other people's feelings, and they're good at managing relationships. They do it in a really honest way, without bias or without stereotyping or jumping to conclusions too quickly. And then the fifth aspect is social skills. Most people who have a high degree of emotional intelligence are easy to talk to. They're team players. They help others, and they're really excellent communicators. So how do you become more emotionally intelligent? Identify your own emotions. Be mindful, be aware.
Dr. Wilkin, we're running up on 4 o'clock. So
okay.
if you have a chance to summarize this for folks, that would be great. I'm sorry that we're running out of time.
That's okay. This is pretty much my last slide anyway. Just practice being mindful. And one of the things that I do all the time in any situation, it's a little tool you can use, is called stop. You just stop what you're doing for a minute, take a break, observe your body, your sensations, your emotions, and then go on. And that has helped me in so many situations, and it's easy to remember, just stop. So don't know if you want to do the scenario. We probably don't have time for that, but here it is. You all can think about it, and maybe offline, see how you can practice the peace model. One of the things that I learned through my whole field of conflict management is being good isn't good enough if you can't get along with people. And so that's why the aspect of the peace model is so important. So that's what I have. questions?
Thank you very much. This was very interesting. It's given me a lot of things to think about, and I'll send our participants your presentation. And I
Okay.
assume it's all right if they reach out to you if they've got questions after today's session.
Absolutely. Yes, please reach out to me. lwilkin@sullivan.edu. Sheila has that, my contact information as well. So please reach out if you have any questions at all.
I'll leave you all with one final note before we conclude for the day. One thing that struck me was one source of conflict in teams that I was aware of when I worked at an institution was related to deadlines. So I would encourage you to be aware of the deadlines that the people that you lead are obliged to follow or to meet. One good example is if at the University of Kentucky, if you ask a staff member to buy you a laptop on June 10th, they'll look at you like you're crazy because the deadline for fiscal year end closed by computers was probably mid-May. So there are types of deadlines that your staff are going to be following that you should be aware of too, also so you can help the faculty and the department and the other staff to adhere to those deadlines. And the other thing I was thinking about was self-inflicted deadlines. If you have something that needs to go out and it's your own deadline, you might consider bending your deadline just a little bit. If something's got to go out for a committee meeting next week and one thing isn't ready, well, maybe you can send it out without that one thing that's missing and then follow up later. So I do want to encourage you to think about the deadlines that you have in your offices and what people are adhering to. I appreciate your all's time today. I've gone over and I apologize for that. But I appreciate everyone's attendance today. I appreciate your participation and I enjoy seeing your smiling faces. So we'll reconvene in January. I hope you have a fantastic end of November and all of December, and we'll see you in early January. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.